and welcome to AJ Paints. I'm Andy. This is the second video in my series on the Rogue Purge, miniatures from Core Space by Battle Systems. They were originally released in 2020 but went out of print fairly soon as they were quite fiddly resin miniatures, but I love them because of their detail. They're robots from the future, but I always wondered how would they fit in Battle Systems' other fantasy game, Maladum, Dungeons of Enveron. So this series aims to address that. This is Harvey, the Harvester, who I converted in my previous video. You can see him here carrying his fantasy weapon and sporting a beautiful cloak. This time I'm going to look at the Assassin, Deadeye. He's a fearsome antagonist with multiple arms and speed to match. You can see here my imagined version of him wielding swords and knives and ready to take part in your dungeon adventures. So this is one of the original Rogue Purge resin casts. I was lucky enough to get hold of a number of these, which is why I'm quite happy to chop them up even though they're long out of print and very expensive on eBay. You can see here I'm taking off one of the arms. There's a head remaining on the sprue here, and we'll get started with our conversion. So this sort of sci-fi weapon here definitely needs to come off. We don't want anything lasery or lightsabery. So I've chopped that out and actually taken it right down to the base and used my knife to carve out something like a hand. I'm going to try it out here. I always like to test out things on my kit bashes first, get the pose right, make sure I'm happy before I super glue it all together. I'm getting this one on the base early. I'm just using a plastic 25mm base here, again some super glue. It helps me to hold the whole thing together as I'm doing my work. I've increasingly found that tweezers are a really useful part of my hobby arsenal, and in this case mounting the really small head, tweezers have been vital actually, so a bit of super glue there has held it in place. Now I've got this arm from a different miniature. I've actually used one of the assassin arms on my previous build, so that's the assassin arm there, but the other one is from one of the harvesters. And now onto the fantasy weapons. There's loads of places you can get Kitbash weapons from, but I found two fantastic sprues from Frostgrave. One is the Barbarian sprue and the other is the Wizard sprue. So you can see here, trying out the hand that I've already cut, I filed that out a little bit as well to give it a bit more of an open hand, and that axe looks pretty good, and I really like the look of this wiggly dagger here for one of his other arms. And with those pieces trimmed out and pressed into place on the hand, it's time to glue the arm in place, and I'm just moving it around until I've got it in the position that I'm happy with, and the super glue is holding it really quickly, as it always does with resin models. So this is the second arm, the one that's originally taken from the harvester, and I'm looking for a position here which doesn't interfere with the other arm too much. Now this is some proper kit bashing here, some I think it's 1mm, maybe 1/2 mil plastic card, and I'm cutting out some small sections and trimming them to shape because I want to make a big claw to go on one of the assassin's other arms, and you'll see me attaching that in a second. With the pieces trimmed to shape and the magical tweezers out again, it's time to get these attached on. Now at this point I'm just holding it in place. You can see here it's slightly different. I've trimmed it down actually. Bit of super glue, 1, 2 and a third one around the other side gives me a really fantastic gripping arm built onto the original assassin resin arm. And there it is. It's looking a bit big, but it'll be fine once it's painted, and maybe if it's holding some kind of weapon. So super glue is the tool of choice here, as well as the tweezers again. I'm just locking all those pieces into place. So that side's looking good. I'm happy with the way they look, and it's time to move on to the claw that I created earlier. And I really think that needs to be holding something rather than just a claw. So this is one of the Frostgrave swords. It had a hand on it. I don't want the hand. So with my beautiful clippers, it's time to cut that off and then scrape the handle back with the knife. There we go. All ready for jamming into the claw. And there we go. It's a pretty simple kit bash really, but I'm very pleased with that. I don't think it needs any more than the fantasy weapons to sell the idea that this robot's come from the future and is ready to raid some dungeons. So I think the next thing to do is to get some paint on this miniature. I'm going to start, as always, with black primer from Vallejo. You can airbrush it on, you can brush it on. I'm just doing it with the brush here to show that you don't need an airbrush. And there we go. Good, clean, flat finish to start with. White can be an intimidating colour to paint, but this is my method. I like to start with a blue colour. In this case I'm using grey blue from Vallejo. It happens to be an air paint. That's not because that's a brilliant kind of paint, I just like it for that. I'm also base coating the cloak here, and I'm going to jump onto the fabrics here and get them done before I finish the white armour. So a dark green base coat for this cloak, a dark-ish turquoise base coat for this cloak, and then we're going to move on to the highlights. So for the green I'm just mixing in a little bit of ice yellow from Vallejo and gradually building up that lighter colour there. And for the blue, I'm moving on to a different colour, two colours actually, ducat blue from AK Interactive for the first highlights, and then gradually mixing in some pastel blue for the lighter shades, focusing on areas at the top where the light would fall. And the brightest highlights here are pretty much straight pastel blue. You can see I'm tapping rather than really painting or brushing because I want a little bit of texture to my cloth and I don't want the highlights to be too strong. Cloth's done, I'm not going to touch that again in this tutorial. And back to the white armour, these are the colours that I'll be using. I will get up to white eventually, but we're going to go for a real blue shade here. So my initial base of grey blue is all over everything, and I'm starting to mix in that paler blue and I'm focusing on, as I usually do, the left hand side and the top, imagining that the light's falling from up there, and just finding those light areas, edges, anything that's going to sell the idea that this is a 3D shape, and to start to build up towards a white colour. Although we're aiming to hit white eventually, this is a great stepping stone in between. Pastel blue, lovely shade, and I'm going for slight edges and then a tiny line in between, so just really small areas here to make that light really shine. The final highlights here, white mixed in with the pastel blue, just really focusing on small areas. White's such a strong colour on its own, so it allows me to sell the idea that this is white, but also show the shadows in as that sort of greyish blue, and you get a lovely finish. Whether you're painting original Rogue Purge, original Purge, or the my Maladum inspired stuff, that's a pretty decent recipe for your white armour, so hopefully that works out for you. Moving on now to some non-metallic metal. I usually prefer to paint my metals this way now. I like the way that the highlights look, and this is a group of colours that I find work nicely. So we're going to start off with dark sea blue. It's pretty thin here, you can see by the shine that you're getting on the video there, and I'm giving it a fairly solid coat of that, and then focusing on a couple of areas just towards the ends of the sword, making the top side and the bottom side different, then gradually going through that range of colours and mixing in the lighter ones as you go through. So I'm looking to pick out edges, and I'm looking to paint little highlight lines, almost like I'm illustrating really, on the sword there to pick out where the highlights or the shines would be. Now, although these highlights look quite strong, they are really reasonably dark. I'm looking at shades of grey really here, but you keep mixing, keep going, keep bringing up those highlights, and you want to get them really bright fairly quickly. So as you do that, a nice clean brush, a sharp brush, and then you can get some beautiful highlights, and that sells the idea. The darker you can get to the lighter you can get, the faster, the more it looks like metal. Now it's not quite finished, we need a little bit of ink shading on there, but it's a cartoony sort of look, but I like it for this miniature. So in my mind, Deadeye has been stuck under a pile of rubble for thousands of years. making his way into the future. So we need to get some rust colours on. There's loads of ways you can do rust, but this is one of the ways that I like. We're going to start off with a burnt red, a reasonably dark colour. It's wet. I really mixed this down so it's more like a wash, and I'm just painting that into joints and crevices, places where I think might pick up some rust. Once that's dry, you can go in with a lighter orange. You can see me here picking out some areas, and don't go over the top with it, just a few little bits and bobs, and it looks good. Now the dagger was looking a bit boring. I painted it the same non-metallic metal way as the other sword, but a bit of green express colour or contrast paint really brings that out, makes it look fantastic. And in the same way here, I'm putting a red reflection on the underside of this. Don't know why, maybe standing over some fire or something. It looks cool. Red on the bottom, and later on I'll put some purple on the top. Now for this bit, there's loads of wires and details on this miniature. I've got no idea which red colours I used, so it's a medium red and then a light red. Just pick out whatever you can. Paint it, gradually make it lighter, and it'll look fantastic. So whenever you think you're done, you're not done. And it's a good idea to have a good look around your miniature and see what looks good. Contrast is always an important thing. So here, as I'm looking at it, I realised that there was some separation that I needed to build in. So getting some black paint, getting it thinned right down and brushing it into areas which I felt were blending together a bit too much made the miniature look better in the end. As I said earlier, I was going to put some more colour on the sword, and a little bit of purple really helped to bring some colour to that bit, which was looking a bit dull. So I got a bit lazy here. A mixture of grey and pale sand gives me a sort of desaturated ivory, and I basically went around everything that needed highlighting. You can see here painting some wrappings, some bindings on the axe. I used it for the all of the metal parts, the underneath parts, which I think I probably did in contrast black. Just anything to make some of those areas stand out. In the same way that I used the black previously, I'm using this to build that contrast and make the miniature look fantastic. And once again we're back to the black. Again, I had a look at it, I thought there wasn't enough contrast. There were a few places that I needed to just work on a bit more, so there we go. But once that was done, I finally decided that we were finished, and all that remains really for this one is to base it. I've given it a flat grey coat on the base, which you'll see in a second in the finished shots. And here we are, finished miniature. A little bit more detail, the stripe on his face I've painted in, and the eyes, but basically that's it. If you're lucky enough to own one of these miniatures and you fancy a conversion, then please feel free to follow the video and give it a try. Anyway, thank you for staying for this long, and I'll see you again next time.